Hello, everybody, and welcome to this lesson 6 in the Chess Beginner to Winner series, in which we take you from absolute chess beginner to winning tournament games and beyond. So today we'll be covering chess piece values for beginners here. So in the previous lessons, I started with everything you need to know, to start playing chess. How to set up the board, the difference between checkmate and stalemate, how the pieces move. But as you start playing, you may just be moving the pieces at random, and you might ask yourself, well, what does it matter if I give up a knight for a pawn, or give up a rook for a bishop or a knight? Or even give up my queen for a rook. You may not know how to determine when to give something up, when not to, when to make a trade or a capture. So today I'm just going to talk about the general rules for the value of the pieces. So just to give you an idea of what the pieces are worth, they're usually measured by pawn value. So let's say a pawn, of course, is worth one pawn, but how many pawns is a bishop worth or a knight worth? So this is a general rule. Knights and bishops are about equal. Now, all of these rules have circumstances where something might dictate otherwise. So in general, a knight, so we'll put this knight here. Let me set up a position here so it lets me move these pieces around. All right. So let's say we have a knight here. One knight is worth the equivalent of 3 pawns. Okay. One bishop, which is equal to the knight, is also worth 3 pawns. So if you're going to give up a knight or a bishop for pawns, try to at least get 3 pawns worth of material if you happen to do that. But in general, do not trade your pieces for pawns unless you think you have some good attack or some reason to do otherwise. So knights and bishops are generally about equal, but the differences between the knights and the bishop. Knights can jump to both colored squares, whereas a bishop is always trapped on the same color square that he started at. So that is the negative point when it comes to bishops. If you only have one bishop, then you're stuck on that colored square. And also, bishops can be blocked by their own pieces and pawns, whereas knights can jump over them. So that's the major difference between knights and bishops. Knights can just jump over everything. They're slower, but they can jump over pieces and not get blocked in as much. Whereas bishops, they can zoom around the board from one side to the other pretty fast unless they're blocked in by pieces and pawns. So knights do a little better in blocked, closed positions because they can jump over everything. But bishops are better in wide open positions. And also, if you have 2 bishops, the dark squared bishop and the light squared bishop, and your opponent does not, that's usually a little bit of an advantage. Especially if he has one of the bishops. Well, then let's say he has the light squared bishop and you have that, but he does not have the dark squared bishop. Well, then that dark squared bishop can give you an advantage because it'll be covering all those dark squares that your opponent cannot cover if he doesn't have that bishop anymore. All right, so back to piece values. Basically, a single pawn is the currency by which we measure the value of the pieces. So a knight is worth 3 pawns. A bishop is worth 3 pawns. And now you might ask, well, how much is a rook worth? Well, a rook is more valuable than a knight or a bishop because the rook, like the bishop, it can travel quickly across the entire length of the board if it's not blocked by pieces or pawns. But the rook is stronger in that it can, go to any color square. So it can move to the light or dark squares, whereas a bishop is trapped, always remaining on the same color squares that it started on. So a rook being more valuable is worth 5 pawns. So, if you're going to give up a rook for pawns, you better make sure you take about 5 pawns worth of material here to be able to equal 1 rook. Or if you get a bishop and 2 pawns, a knight or 2 pawns, or a bishop or 2 pawns, plus 2 pawns, So anything that totals up to 5 pawns worth of material, because a bishop is worth 3 pawns and a knight is worth 3 pawns, you would have to capture with your rook a bishop plus 2 pawns to make an even trade here. So remember that. And a lot of times, some players, they may try and trade off. Let's see, I'll give you a good example here. Let's say, if I can get these pieces straight. All right, let me move these pieces around here. Let's say that black is castled and white has a bishop and a knight lined up here. Well, generally, if you captured here and the rook captured and then you recaptured and the king captured, you would have gotten a knight and a bishop from white in exchange for 1 pawn and a rook here. So a rook is worth 5 and a pawn is worth 1, so a total of 6, and a knight is worth 3 and a pawn is worth 3. So they're both worth about a total of 6 pawns worth of material, but generally you wouldn't want to go through with this trade because many times, these 2 strong pieces are a little more valuable. You have 2 good attacking pieces that you can use, and you're giving them up for 1 attacking piece and this pawn. So that's where just experience comes into play to know whether or not making trades are good or bad. And I'll try and teach you more of that as we go along and go up through these lessons, and they teach you more and they become a little more, complicated, or the knowledge becomes a little bit, I don't want to say harder to learn, but as you learn more and improve, you'll know when to make trades and when not to. Okay, so let's get back to this. Knights are worth about 3 pawns. Bishops are worth about 3 pawns. Rooks are worth 5 pawns, or a knight and 2 pawns, or a bishop and 2 pawns. Now the queen. The queen is so valuable because it can move like a bishop or a rook, and it can cover so much of the board and zip across the board in 1 move. Because the queen is so powerful, it is worth 9 pawns of material here. So pretty crazy. You would need to capture 9 pawns, and you only have 8 pawns in your opponent's camp. So a better example would be a rook, which is worth 5, and then another piece like a knight or a bishop. So this is a total of 8 pawns worth of material, and then a pawn here. So a queen would be the equivalent of a rook, a knight, and a pawn, or a rook, a bishop, and a pawn. And then another combination would be maybe a bishop and two knights. So each of these are worth 3 pawns. And so a total of 9. And the queen is worth 9 pawns. Now, sometimes you might come across a point where you're trying to make a decision on whether or not to give up, let's see here, your queen for 2 rooks. So let me, anyway, I'll just bring the rooks out here. So let's say you have some point in the game where you have the option to capture, I don't know, we'll say something like this. If a bishop was here at some point in the game, and you have the option to capture, rook captures, and bishop captures. Well, now you've given up your queen for 2 rooks. Is that worth it? Should you have done that? Well, probably, because the rooks are worth 5 points apiece, a total of 10 pawns, and the queen is worth 9. So in general, it's probably good to capture the 2 rooks for your queen. But then again, that's where experience comes in, and you have to take a careful look at the board, because if you pick off these 2 rooks and you're left with your opponent having a queen and you only have your 2 rooks, so if you make the trade here and these pieces are removed, so then white has a queen and you have 2 rooks, you have to make sure that the pieces that are left on the board, just make sure that you're not going to be in trouble after you do that, because in general, trading your queen for 2 rooks would be a good thing to do. But if you do that, you want to see what pieces are left on the board and how they're positioned, especially the king, because you don't want to get in trouble by giving up your queen and then your opponent's queen runs around the board wreaking havoc and attacking and checking your king all over the place and capturing. So the point I'm trying to get to here is that these are general values of how much the pieces are worth. So knights and bishops worth about 3 pawns apiece. Rooks worth 5 pawns of material, or a knight and 2 pawns, or a bishop and 2 pawns. And then the queen is worth 9 points, which is either 2 bishops and a knight or 2 knights and a bishop. So 3 of these minor pieces, and the minor pieces are the bishops and knights. So 1 queen would be worth these 3 pieces here, or 1 queen could be worth a rook and a bishop or a knight and a pawn. So that's a general guideline. If you're thinking about trading pieces and you want to know if you came out ahead after the trade, well, just use the value of the pieces as a guide to make your decision. But the point that I want to stress here is that the piece values are a general guideline, but there are always exceptions. And sometimes there are crazy exceptions. So you could be ahead all kinds of material, but if you're checkmated, then none of that material matters. And you may have also asked, well, what is the value of the king? Well, the king doesn't really have a pawn value placed on it. The king may be a little bit stronger than a bishop or a knight. possibly in the end game because it can move to all the different colors in any direction. But usually a value is not given to the king because it's invaluable or priceless. If you lose the king, you're checkmated and the game's over. So just remember that. Sometimes you can break the rules and win the game by sacrificing material. And when to do that, that really comes down to experience. And so before I end this lesson today, I want to show you an amazing game that all beginners should take a look at because this is such an incredible game. Let me set this up here. So this game took place in 1858, and it was played, the white pieces were played by Paul Morphy, who was basically an unofficial champion back in the 1850s. And he's probably considered, one of the first, I guess, unofficial world champions. And he was a phenomenal player that at a young age, he might have been around 20 or even younger, he won a national tournament in the United States and just pretty much destroyed everybody he played. Then he went overseas to Europe and just started winning against all the chess masters over there. So what I'm going to show you by playing through this game is how you can determine whether or not it's good to sacrifice pieces. Should you follow the rules of, if I give up a knight, I have to make sure I get an equal amount of material in return, either another knight or a bishop or 3 pawns. Well, sometimes the rules can be broken, and this game is a good example. So let's see how this game was played. Paul Morphy played, I believe this was at a Paris opera house in 1858, and he played against a duke and a count, Duke of Brunswick and Count Isouard. So they played as a team against him. And one thing that's interesting is, now you probably guessed that Paul Morphy, as good as he was, won the game, which that's true. He did win. But I want to show you what the computer says in a game review here. It looks like Paul Morphy played at a 98.7% accuracy in this game, and the opponents played at 71.8%. So it was a great player playing against a weaker pair of players. So I guess 2 brains were not better than 1 in this example. And Paul Morphy played at a 3100 rating level here, and his opponents played at 1900. 1900 is respectable, but compared to chess masters and world-class players, Paul Morphy even played at an amazing level here. He played the opening with 100% accuracy. They played the opening with 79, and then he played the middle game with 98.3% accuracy, and they played 69.2. Okay, so let's jump into this awesome game here, and it's pretty short. So now I had a viewer also request that I play a game, or go through a game where I explain everything that I'm thinking as I play. So I'll try and do that in this game, what I would be thinking, or what most chess players, just some of the things that go through their mind and that they think about when they're playing. So the first thing you want to do is decide, well, what should I do in the opening? Well, I want to try and control the center of the board because that's very important in chess. Because in the center, you can move your pieces to the center and then on to other areas. So, and it's just easier to move pieces into the center, control the center, and then move them from there to wherever else you need to go. the center of the board, these four squares in the middle, are kind of like the high ground on a battlefield. From the middle, you can look down over top the battlefield and keep an eye on everything and figure out where to attack and defend. So, Paul Morphy plays e4 here, which is a good, solid opening move, and it is good if you like tactics. So, what does this move do? It puts a piece in the center, and it makes room for your bishop and queen to develop. It controls another important square in the center here, and it gets the king closer to being able to castle to safety here, because it allows room for that bishop to come out, the knight to move here shortly, and then he can castle to safety in a little barricade here in the corner. So the opponent also plays e5, a good solid response. They're both fighting for the center and they're keeping things even. So Paul Morphy plays a good move here. So when you're trying to figure out what to play in your openings, you just want to pick one. Now there's different ways you can play, and you can decide that as you play more. But a good way to start is to just pick one opening and stick with that until you learn how to play it and improve with it. So e4 is a good way to start. If your opponent plays e5, another good move is knight to f3. And you want to move the knights usually first before your bishops because they're slower than the bishops. And the knights are almost always good when you place them on knight to f3 here, or this knight to c3. But if you move this knight first, you're getting ready to castle your king to safety faster and bring your rook closer to the center where the action will be. So the opponent responds with d6 here, just fortifying and protecting this central pawn. The only bad thing about this move is that it blocks this bishop in, and it didn't develop a piece. So maybe a better move would have been to just bring this knight out here. And it's getting a little dark in here. I'm going to turn that light on. Hopefully the glare isn't too bad on my glasses here. So let's see. Morphy responds with d4. Now, what was he thinking when he did this? Well, if you have one pawn in the center that's strong and solid, usually two pawns is even better, because now you're attacking all these central squares, and you're also attacking this pawn here. And normally, when your opponent puts two pawns in the center, a lot of times you want to knock one of them out of there. But here, our opponent plays bishop to g4, and the computer says this is an inaccuracy because he ignored this pawn in the center here, and he tries to pin this knight to, the queen, so that now the knight cannot move, or the bishop will capture that queen. And he also tries to get just a piece developed here. But this is not the best move. If we go back, it looks like it would have been better to just go ahead and capture this pawn here. But the opponent moves this piece, and what does Morphy do? He tries to take advantage of this inaccurate move by just going ahead and capturing this valuable pawn here. So the opponent, he thinks, well, if I capture here like this, well, then now he could just capture my queen, and then the king would have to capture back. But this would give white time to just pick off this pawn, because the bishop is no longer pinning that knight to the queen because the queen moved. And now white just captured an extra pawn, and he also has a threat of jumping up here and attacking this pawn and by moving here, attacking the king and the rook at the same time. And also this bishop is under attack. So the best move would now be to move this bishop back here and protect this pawn. So the bishop would move back here. Now it's not under attack anymore, and it covers this pawn here to prevent the knight from jumping in there, getting a pawn, and then attacking the king and taking a rook. So that is an example. If we go back here to the actual game, so Morphy is thinking that he can go ahead and material by playing this. So he goes after the pawn. So now he's ahead. And white, being ahead a pawn, Morphy knows that he does not want to capture here, or his queen will be captured. Or excuse me, did I say Morphy? Morphy's opponents know that they do not want to capture this pawn, or Morphy's opponents will lose his queen. So instead, they capture here, and this is a mistake. It looks like it would have been better to just move up a knight here, develop a knight, and just, I guess let this pawn capture another piece. Or let this pawn capture another pawn. But in the game, we have bishop captures on f3, a mistake. And so Morphy plays the best move. His queen's under attack, and he just recaptures, keeping the material even. But now the opponents think, oh, we can get our pawn back. So they just capture their pawn back, and now material is even. But the problem is Morphy is getting his pieces out faster than the opponent. So what he does now is move his bishop out. And this is the best move because it attacks this weak f7 square with this pawn here, not only with the bishop, but with the queen, and he threatens moving the queen up and delivering a checkmate. So to stop that, the opponent plays an inaccurate move. It would have been better to just move the queen down and block and attack the opponent's queen. But the opponent moves here, moving this knight up and blocking the queen from delivering mate. So what does the queen do? What does Morphy do? He plays another brilliant move here, a great move, moving his queen to this side. Now the queen and the bishop line up, threatening to capture this pawn with check, but also the queen is threatening this pawn here. So the queen is basically forking with the help of the bishop, this pawn and this pawn. So the opponent responds by just moving here, which it says is an excellent move. This prevents the capture here of this pawn. And now what does Morphy do? You would think, well, would he go after this pawn here and just get this free pawn? Well, Morphy doesn't want to do that. Even though the computer, that's funny, the computer says that is best. So here, the opponent would be able to do this, delivering check, and the queen is under attack. So Morphy would have to capture, and then the pawn would capture. So Morphy did not want to give up his attacking material, even though he would be ahead. So he did not play this. Instead, after the queen moved here, he just kept developing his pieces. So in chess, it's a race. You want to get your pieces out as fast as you can. And he also protects this pawn in the middle here. So the opponent responds by moving this pawn to c6, and now the queen is not only protecting the f7 pawn, but also this pawn over here. So now what do? Just keep developing pieces. So the bishop needed to move. Where is a good place to put this bishop? Well, you could put it here and pin this knight to the queen. So now the knight can't move or the bishop will capture that more valuable queen. So continuing on, now b5 is played, and this is an inaccuracy once again by Morphy's opponents. So this lesson was about the value of the chess pieces. Now, normally you wouldn't want to give up one of your pieces for a pawn because the bishops and knights are worth 3 pawns. But Morphy breaks the rules here. So there are always exceptions to the rule. He gives up his knight, playing a brilliant move with 2 exclamation marks here. So just a very brilliant move, giving up the knight. And so, what does the opponent do? Well, it looks like the best move would have been to deliver check here. The queen would capture, and then the bishop would recapture with check. But instead of that, the opponents gobble up the material, thinking, oh, he gave us material, we're going to go ahead here and be winning the game. But they're wrong about that, because now there's a recapture, and that knight was given up and material was given up. So right now they are basically 1 pawn's worth of material ahead. But Morphy has gained an attack. He checks the king with this bishop, so the opponent blocks, and now this knight is pinned to the king and cannot move. So what does Morphy do? He plays the best move in the position. He castles on the queen side, which gets his king to safety, but it adds another attacking piece here in the center. This rook is firing up the open file here and adding to the pressure of this knight with this bishop lined up on the king and the knight. So the opponent just brings a rook over here to help protect that knight. But now Morphy gives up even more material. So if we go back and look, he's giving up a rook that is worth 5 pawns worth of material for a knight that is only worth 3 pawns of material. So another exception to the rule. He gives up that material, and now Morphy's opponents, they decide, oh, we'll grab even more material with this rook capture. But now the bishop has pinned this rook to the king, and it can't move. So Morphy just swings his other rook over here and adds more attacking firepower down the middle of the board. And so, what should Morphy's opponents do? They're running out of options, and they have a rook and a bishop that are sitting over here doing nothing, and all of Morphy's pieces are in the attack. So the queen moves out of the way here. That way this knight will not be pinned to the queen. So now the knight can help protect this rook that is being piled up on by the bishop and this rook. So we have a capture here, delivering check. So now Morphy's opponents think, well, I can just grab that piece there and just grab up more material. But that wasn't the best move. The best move would be to just give up your queen. So we could take a look at that. Give up the queen. And then we would have this move, delivering check, and the king would move down here. But now the queen could just move over here, and you see the king would just be chased all around. But white, would still be ahead. So let's take a look at what actually happened in the game. And it's pretty crazy, this ending. So if we go back here and take a look. So Morphy swings his rook over here, adding more pressure to this rook here that cannot move because of the bishop lined up on the king. So the queen moves out of the way to let this knight guard the rook. So we have a capture with the bishop. attacking the king and the queen. So the knight captures, but now another brilliant move by Morphy here, giving up his queen. He attacks the king. And remember, whenever you're in check, there are only three things that you can do. Block the attacker, and nothing can get in between here, none of black's pieces. Run, the king cannot run because of this bishop cutting off these squares, and black's other pieces are blocking him. So the only other option is to capture the attacker. So the only move available is for the knight to capture. But this opens up the final move. Morphy delivers a stunning checkmate here. And this is just very amazing. So the rook is delivering checkmate because this bishop is protecting the rook. And there are no pieces that can capture. The king can't capture the rook because it's protected by the bishop. And there's nowhere for the king to run. And now, if we look at the value of the pieces on the board, we see that black is ahead by the equivalent of 10 pawns worth of material. And so that's why I wanted to show you this game, is because there are always exceptions to the rules. And the more you play, you'll be able to figure out when to break the rules. So in general, you kind of want to stick to the rules and make even trades. But you can have fun sometimes and experiment with crazy chess moves and see how they turn out. And the more experience you have, you'll get closer to having crazy winning games like Morphy did here. Pretty incredible when you see that he just has two pieces left on the board and his opponent still has a queen, but we have a knight, a bishop, and a rook, and they're on the back row here, not really doing anything. So that's how Morphy won. He was able to get his pieces out quickly and have them well organized and just keep attacking. So I hope you enjoyed this. What is this? Lesson 6, which was, chess piece values for beginners. So all you beginners out there, I hope this helped you figure out how much the pieces are worth. Just remember, knights and bishops are worth about 3 pawns. Rooks are worth about 5 pawns. Or a knight or a bishop and 2 pawns equal 1 rook. And then the queen is worth either 2 knights and a bishop, or 2 bishops and a knight, or a rook, a knight, and a pawn, or a rook, a bishop, and a pawn, add up to 9 pawns worth of material, which equals the value of a queen. All right. Well, just remember, there are always exceptions to the rule. You can have all the material in the world and be winning, but if you're checkmated, then all that material doesn't matter. So just keep that in mind. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions, or any requests. I may be a little busier in the holidays and the end of the year, and I may not be able to get as many videos out as I like to. But hang in there, and in the new year I should be able to make more videos. And I'll try to keep putting them out now in the meantime to help all you beginners progress from chess beginners to winning tournament games and beyond. Thank you, everyone, and have a super chess day.